Up next, Michael Wolraich, founder of the political commentary blog dagblog.com, argues that the political right foments fear and attacks the left by the use of persecution politics. He examines what he considers the paranoia of the right and how it's affecting American political debate. Mr. Wolraich discusses his book at Barnes & Noble booksellers in New York City for about an hour.
So I'm Michael Wolraich. I'm a founder of dagblog.com. That's dagblog.com. It's a multi-person blog famed across the blogosphere for civil, if occasionally sharp-tongued debate. Come check out the repartee there. We always have a good time, and I think get deep into some of these challenging issues. I'm also, as Lou said, a regular contributor to CNN.com, and I got my start at blogging at Talking Points Memo Cafe. This is my first book, Blowing Smoke. I won't try to read the whole title again because that'll take up the rest of the time. I'm going to give you 4 readings. The first reading from the preface will tell you what persecution politics is all about. The second will give you an example of how persecution politics has been used. Then we'll go a little back in the time machine and see where this all started. And then finally, in the fourth, I'll talk about what effect persecution politics has had on the political system, particularly the elections that we had just a little bit over a month ago. So, without further ado, why is it okay to discriminate against white males? Demanded MSNBC commentator Pat Buchanan, his voice shrill with outrage. Is the volume okay? Is that... His colleague... It's too loud? His colleague, Rachel Maddow, had invited him onto her liberal news and opinion show to discuss the Supreme Court nomination of Judge Sonia Sotomayor. But the debate quickly shifted to affirmative action. Warming instantly to the topic, Buchanan indignantly denounced the tragic suffering of white males in America, rhythmically chopping his hands through the air as if he could physically whack the whole idea of affirmative action to bits. He was sort of going like this. He admonished Maddow and her friends up there in New York, chiding, "You never look at these guys who are working-class guys with their own dreams, just like Sonia Sotomayor." The much younger Rachel Maddow seemed bemused by Buchanan's tirade. She dismissed his reproaches and replied with a half-smile, "You're living in the 1950s, Pat." But Maddow was wrong, for there was no affirmative action to speak of in the 1950s, and the notion that white people suffered from reverse discrimination did not become popular until the late 1970s. Moreover, Buchanan's rhetoric about white victims has become all too common since the election of President Obama, whom right-wing stars like Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck have accused of racism against white people. A few days after the Maddow-Buchanan duel in July 2009, I wrote a blog post about a lawsuit over the national motto of the United States, "In God We Trust." During my research for the article, I learned that the doctrine of separation of church and state is really a liberal scam to discriminate against Christians who are apparently suffering from even greater oppression than America's white males. Rush Limbaugh's younger brother David explained the details in his 2004 book, Persecution: How Liberals Are Waging War Against Christians. Perhaps former Representative John Hostetler of Indiana read it. When Congress sought to curb abusive proselytizing in the Air Force Academy in 2005, he accused Democrats of denigrating and demonizing Christians, and he fumed on the House floor, "The long war on Christianity in America continues unabated with aid and comfort to those who would eradicate any vestige of our Christian heritage." As I read about the long war on Christianity, with Buchanan's rage against affirmative action still in my mind, the parallels between accusations of white victimization and Christian persecution popped brightly out of the screen of my laptop computer. Liberal bloggers often mock conservatives' persecution complex, but I had previously considered conservative complaints about mistreatment to be a reflexive gripe, like the line from Charlie Brown by the Coasters, "Why is everybody always picking on me?" But in July 2009, it suddenly occurred to me that the persecution accusations amounted to more than political grumbling. They represented key tactics in a pervasive, deep-seated political strategy by the right. I had no idea how deep it sat. As I burrowed backward in history, persecution narratives appeared like hidden patterns in the mosaic at nearly every critical moment in the evolution of modern conservatism, from the formation of the religious right to the rise of Fox News. At the same time, the present-day political scene in the fall of 2009 abruptly went mad. Tea Party protesters carried signs comparing Obama to Hitler, as Glenn Beck warned of communist conspiracies at the highest level of government. And everywhere that madness reigned, I found the thread of persecution paranoia winding through the mania. I call this thread persecution politics. It is a rhetorical strategy to convince millions of white, heterosexual, Christian, conservative gun owners that an evil conspiracy of liberal elites, black radicals, illegal immigrants, gay fascists, and other disturbing bad guys are taking away their rights, their guns, their health care, their freedom, their traditions, their children, and their favorite television programs. Blowing Smoke is the history of persecution politics, how it began, why it works, and what it has done to the country. So that's what persecution politics is. Here's an example of how it's been used. How many of you people have ever read the Drudge Report? If you haven't, I don't necessarily recommend it. But Drudge Report is a conservative news site. It was founded by Matt Drudge, and got fame for breaking the Monica Lewinsky story back in the late 90s. Now, the Drudge Report typically has a very, very large alarmist headline. Some might like to call it ginormous. It takes up the half the screen. And there was a particular headline on September 15th, 2009 that read, "White student beaten on school bus. Crowd cheers." The magic word in this Drudge headline, the one that earned it a gargantuan font, is white. The conservative editors of the Drudge Report are not particularly interested in racially motivated school bus beatings. They're not even particularly interested in racially motivated school bus beatings. But if the victim is white, the assailants are black, and a busload of black students calls out, "Beat his ass," and "boom, boom, boom," then Drudge throws a fat font fit. And not just Drudge. Fox News aired footage from the school bus surveillance camera. The anchorman grimly warned viewers that the video was disturbing, perhaps because it had been edited with a slow-motion replay of flailing punches as a voiceover intoned, "The two suspects are 14 and 15. They are African American. The victim is white." On Fox News show Kelly's Court, host Megyn Kelly indignantly demanded punishment for the assailants, for the cheering children, for the parents of the cheering children, and for the hapless bus driver. She declared, "The scars this kid is going to suffer for the rest of his life thanks to those hooligans on that bus can't be overstated." Though the fact that the victim did not require hospital care suggests that the scars could, in fact, be overstated. Unless perhaps Kelly was referring to the emotional scars inflicted by public humiliation on national television. At the front of the persecution parade, twirling his big black bigotry baton like an enraged overweight drum major, marched Rush Limbaugh, fulminating about the hellish state of Obama's America. "Greetings, my friend. It's Obama's America, is it not? Obama's America. White kids getting beat up on school buses now. I mean, you put your kids on a school bus, you expect safety. But in Obama's America, the white kids now get beat up, with the black kids cheering, 'Yeah, yeah, right on, right on.'" The black-on-white school bus assault must have seemed like a godsend to Limbaugh, timed as it was with a Newsweek article titled, "See Baby Discriminate," about a scientific study that suggested a biological predisposition for racism, which Limbaugh interpreted as a liberal broadside against white people. He continued, "And of course everybody says, oh, the white kid deserved it. He was born a racist. He's white. Newsweek magazine told us this. We know that white students are destroying civility on buses. White students destroying civility in classrooms all over America. White congressmen destroying civility in the House of Representatives." By that point, Limbaugh had become so excited by his own oratory that he surrendered any remaining shred of coherence and attempted to connect Obama's socialist economic policies to segregated buses. We can redistribute students while we redistribute their parents' wealth. I mean, we can just redistribute everything. Just return the white students to their rightful place. Their own bus with bars in the windows and armed guards. They're racists. They get what they deserve. Make that segregated prison buses for white school children. The hyperbole is vintage Limbaugh. His rhetorical strategy is to raise his pitch a couple of notes higher than what he really means to convey, singing a piercing F sharp to communicate a shrill E. The exaggeration entertains his audience and infuriates liberals, which suits Limbaugh just fine. And when those high notes cross the line of acceptable public discourse, Limbaugh just shrugs and passes the offense off as satire. Indeed, it's not always easy to distinguish Limbaugh's hyperbole from parodies on The Daily Show. For instance, here's Jon Stewart's take on the school bus assault. Because Barack Obama is president, it is now open white season on white children. And black people are now allowed to hit them. But there are two important differences between Limbaugh's hyperbole and Stewart's parody. One, Stewart is funny. Two, Stewart exaggerates to highlight absurdity, whereas Limbaugh exaggerates for rhetorical emphasis, like calling someone the worst person in the world when you really mean that he's just a big fat liar. So what did Limbaugh really mean when he suggested that Obama wanted to pack white children into their own bus with bars in the windows? He meant that the Obama administration discriminates against whites the way racist state governments used to discriminate against blacks. When he said, we can distribute their parents' wealth, he meant that Obama wants to take money from middle-class white people and give it to poor black people. And finally, when Limbaugh said they're racists, they get what they deserve, he meant that Obama hates whites. The message in short, he will call you names, he will take your money, he will persecute your children because he hates you and everything you stand for. Boom, boom, boom went the persecution drums as Limbaugh hurled his baton into the air and the crowd went wild. Unfortunately for Limbaugh, reality sometimes interferes with exploiting someone's personal misfortune to make a political point. Though the police captain who investigated the school bus assault initially described the attack as racially motivated, he later retracted the assessment, explaining, "It was premature on my part. The incident appears now to be more about a couple of bullies on a bus dictating where people sit." Limbaugh, Drudge, and Fox News soon dropped the story, leaving it to the white supremacists that showed up in Belleville, Illinois, the following weekend, dressed in black and carrying bullhorns and Nazi flags. At a rally near City Hall, they demanded that the assailants be prosecuted for hate crimes, shouting, "Double standard," and "white power." Yes, the Nazis were concerned about hate crimes. Welcome to Obama's America. So next we're going to jump back in time and see how this all got started. What's distinctive about persecution politics and what separates it out from other previous paranoid movements in the U.S., such as the Red Scare and other movements, is that in persecution politics, the leaders have appropriated the language of civil rights, the civil rights movement, only they've turned it on its head. They embrace discussion of persecution and civil rights and civil liberties, but they say we're the ones being discriminated against. It's us white people, us Christians. And in fact, it was a reaction to the civil rights movement where they kind of took a if you can't beat them, join them approach and used the same language, but again turned it around. The spark to this movement was, in fact, school integration in 1954. So we're going to talk about that, how this movement got started.